Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in. This is the Slate, a DraftKings show that takes you up until 6 o'clock. Brendan Glasheen and Jeff Ulrich today, your Monday team. We've been gifted with NFL news the last couple of Mondays here. So we're going to hit the NFL because more quarterback movement across the National Football League. Also, we will turn our attention to the Dell Technologies, some match play coming up in golf this week. That should be fun to look forward to. A big sports book week for golf fans if you want to get involved. And of course, there are daily fantasy contests available over on DraftKings. Jeff, how are you? What's going on?
I'm doing good. Yeah. I mean, this is like a big day for sports. I mean, we're talking about PGA and NFL, but it's the NHL Trade Deadline too, man. I mean, there's stuff going on everywhere. So, I mean, this is one of the busiest Mondays I can remember in quite some time for sure. We got the draw for the PGA. We got, obviously some massive quarterback movement, and all while like the NHL is going through its busiest day of the year too. So cool day.
This is true.
Sports.
This is true. I forgot about that too. The NHL trade deadline. There was action across the league this afternoon. Teams making tweaks for the final push. Some teams selling off pieces, of course, to plan for the future. So if you have any questions, we encourage you to join us in the YouTube chat, also on the Twitch chat, and feel free to leave a comment over on the Twitter stream. So please get involved. We're going to start football. Lost out on the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. I wondered, okay, do they just decide to pivot completely, move off of Matt Ryan, which I know we've talked about this before. You go back a year now, we were still in Madden land. And we're talking like, oh, come on. Like Atlanta should be in discussions to get a quarterback, but Kyle Pitts was their guy and they landed on their feet. That's a hell of a player, no question. But now they have a problem at quarterback until they go out and sign Marcus Mariota. So Mariota to Atlanta, Matt Ryan to Indianapolis. We can start wherever you'd like, but I think I'd like to start Matt Ryan because it's just another team in the AFC that is viable. The Colts land on their feet, and they actually do a pretty good job of this, Jeff. They trade a third-round pick they got in the Wentz trade and Matt Ryan, or pardon me, and Carson Wentz to get Matt Ryan. That's a pretty good trade.
Yeah, it actually is. You're right. I don't disagree necessarily from that perspective. There's two ways to look at the Matt Ryan trade. First of all, I'm not shocked in the least bit that this happened. The second Matt Ryan restructured his contract and then Atlanta became involved in the Deshaun Watson news, it just seemed like something had been worked out. Like that because Atlanta's not going after Deshaun Watson without having a Matt Ryan out, without having already traded away Matt Ryan. And it was clear the only team that could take on Matt Ryan's contract was the Indianapolis Colts. So this news came as zero shock to me. I was basically expecting this to happen the last couple of days, even when Atlanta lost out, because How can you do one without the other? How can you even pursue one without the other? There's two ways to look at this Matt Ryan trade for Indianapolis. I think that Indianapolis is starting to really remind me of like the Denver Broncos when they bought Peyton Manning in. And they've got a really good defense. They've improved it more already in this offseason. Yannick Ngakoue being brought in. I mean, they've already got DeForest Buckner on their D-line. This defense is going to be really good. This is going to be a really good team again. And you say, okay, is Matt Ryan even an upgrade over Carson Wentz? I don't know. Like, he's not going to be a good fantasy quarterback. You're not going to be wanting to draft Matt Ryan next year. I can pretty much guarantee you that unless something significantly changes here. But they've got Jonathan Taylor. They're a rush first team anyways, and they're built behind a good defense. What do you need? You just need someone to manage the game at this point. I think Matt Ryan is, at the very least, even at this stage in his career, a much better game manager than Carson Wentz. Is he going to be able to throw it 70 yards down the field to T.Y. Hilton like Andrew Luck did? No. But is he going to make back-breaking, crucial, ridiculous decisions in the red zone? Probably not, because he's just a conservative quarterback who's been there before. And these veterans, they tend to do okay in these situations when they're behind like good old lines. So again, I'm not purporting Matt Ryan to be some kind of renaissance here. He might even struggle. But when it gets playoff time, Brendan, I think you'll see this Colts team like kind of like rally around him in a way and just say, okay, we're going to carry it. And Matt Ryan make that one or two big plays that we need. And it'll probably be better than last year. So I think it's a good real life move for the Colts. I think it's a good real life move for Atlanta too. You got to pull this Band-Aid off at some point. Better now than later when you're just wasting another year. And I'm interested to see how Indianapolis plays. I think they just got to give themselves a chance again next year.
Indy at plus 2,500 on the DraftKings Sportsbook to win the Super Bowl. So they are even with their division rival Titans. I find that interesting. So they look at those two teams on an equal playing field, and just folks, like if they're there, obviously you go to division winner and they're going to be co-favorites. I would imagine they're co-favorites to win the division. Yes, both at plus 120. To win the conference and to win the Super Bowl, these are absolutely worth a look. If you consider Tennessee just got the number one seed in the conference, then I think Indy is for sure a look. You're getting some value here with both of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, last year I really preferred the Titans over the Colts, and quite frankly, it was the right call. I mean, the Titans got the first round, the first seed. They choked in the playoffs, whatever, but I think they were clearly the better team than Indy last year. They also beat them twice, but that was with Carson Wentz, and a big factor in that decision for me was Carson Wentz. Indy probably has the better running back right now. They for sure have the better defense. I think you'll see this line move to Indianapolis being the favorite when all is said and done. I think that, again, it doesn't look great. It's just Matt Ryan. Say, oh, it's just another version of Carson Wentz. There's a big difference in real life football, I think, between bringing in Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz. And I don't know. You can look at all the advanced stats you want. I don't believe for a second that this isn't a better fit for Indy long term, like in terms of just win-loss, scenario. And one of us is frozen. I don't know if it's me.
It was you for a second. Maybe it was on my end, but I thought you were still talking. Keep going.
Okay. No, I'm good. Okay, I'm back. No, all I just wrapped up was saying I like this move for the Colts. That's it.
Yeah, I do too. Now look, Carson Wentz last year, 27 touchdowns, 7 picks. He was actually pretty good last year statistically. Also, not to go down this road too far, but I think teams across the league see Cole Beasley, see Amari Cooper. I think the Colts were just like, you know what? We want this. We want someone who's available at the end of the year, most important time of the year. We're good. We're gonna rip the Band-Aid off. And you're gonna give us 2 third-round picks and Commanders of Washington. You're gonna take on the full salary. Thank you. And to your point, that's exactly why Indy could make this move, because the Commanders are eating. Also, from a fantasy standpoint, right? Matt Ryan might not be your guy, but I think Michael Pittman is still is very valuable as a wide receiver one next year with Matt Ryan as a quarterback.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that he kind of fits that, big wide receiver, kind of like Julio Jones that Matt Ryan has worked well with his whole career. Matt Ryan could still throw like the little back shoulder, have some of the similar type of success. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't write all these players off. Like, I mean, I do think that, the fringe players, and I think T.Y. Hilton in this offense right now is still a fringe player if he comes back, but like a Paris Campbell, Kiki Kute, if he comes back, whoever else is just outside of Michael Pittman, probably not going to be that big a deal. But, I think Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, I think they'll be fine. I really do. I think this will just be a run first offense. And I don't want to throw out all these cliches, but like, this was kind of just a move for like the locker room for the team. This had nothing to do with stats, in my opinion. The Colts did not like what Carson Wentz was selling. He's never been a leader. He's basically some of the stuff he did, and that's been reported he did in Philly, ridiculous stuff, talking about his teammates behind their back when he was hurt. It just obviously rubbed someone in the Colts the wrong way. And I'm not shocked that this happened. And I think it's just like a leadership change. I think it's going to be very good for the team. I have no idea if it's going to go statistically. I don't think you're going to see big passing numbers from this offense, but we're early, who knows? And Matt Ryan isn't that old, but I think you'll just see Jonathan Taylor dominate. I think it's a good move for the Colts for probably like their 1-year run. And we'll see what Matt Ryan has left at the very least.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. And just one last thought on Matt Ryan too. I mean, maybe a change of scenery is exactly what he needs. I know he's going to the AFC. That's what makes this troubling to process, because looking at all of the young quarterbacks on these elite teams in the AFC. Now, remember, his competition is just Ryan Tannehill, Trevor Lawrence, who could very well pop next year. There's no doubt about that. And Houston, we don't really know yet. We don't know what Houston's plan is at quarterback, unless it's Davis Mills. They could go back to Davis Mills. But maybe this is it's a stretch slightly, because he's younger, he's older than Matthew Stafford, but a change of scenery after being in a place where you did win an MVP one year. Matt Ryan, he won an MVP, got to the Super Bowl. and then they blew it. But maybe the change of scenery makes sense. He plays indoors again. He's inside. He'll be inside like he was in Atlanta. Won't be as warm in Atlanta or in Indy as it was in Atlanta, but possible change of scenery for the division. I think there's some possibilities there with the Colts.
The air temperature kept slightly cooler in the Indy Dome, apparently, according to a Glasheen. But look, he's going to be playing behind a good O-line, which he's not done for a while. So there's certainly a chance that he pops up with a decent year. I just don't think the volume is going to be there for Matt Ryan to be like a legit fantasy quarterback. But again, I think this move has more real life implications than fantasy implications. So
what about his replacement in Atlanta, Marcus Mariota?
This is the one where I think it's really exciting for fantasy purposes. I mean, dual threat quarterbacks they're just so valuable for fantasy football purposes. And, Atlanta, I mean, they're going to be playing in a weak division too, but their defense I don't think they're going to be able to turn around their defense all at once. I mean, they've got some good pieces like a corner with AJ Terrell, like a good linebacker too, but I think they were dead last in sack rate last year. If they weren't dead last, they were like bottom 3. So this is not a defense that is going to go around strutting its stuff, stopping people. You're in a dome environment. There's going to be they're going to get involved in some ugly shootout games. But guess what? That made Matt Ryan viable last year at times. Like Matt Ryan, I mean, if my memory is serving correct, I think he won a couple people $1 million last year, just with some of the big games in DFS. Now you put Marcus Mariota on the fast track at Atlanta in games where potentially he'll be running 50 dropbacks or something potentially. That's exciting to me for fantasy purposes, man. People forget how good an athlete Marcus Mariota is. I mean, this is a former #1 draft pick. He had good enough speed to be considered to maybe even move a position or something to a skill position. That's how skilled he is as a runner. So he's got to stay healthy. Is he going to turn into Russell Wilson in accuracy? Probably not, but he'll have Kyle Pitts to work with in the red zone. We talked about some of his specials that maybe we'll look at here in a sec on the DraftKings Sports, but I think you got him up actually.
I do. Yep.
18 passing touchdowns, over 3,450 yards, 3,450 yards. I mean, I'd probably take the over on the passing touchdowns. I don't know about the passing yardage, but I think Mariota's value for fantasy is it's so much more than Ryan's, because people look at this Atlanta roster and say, oh, it's garbage. They have no wide receivers. Oh, it's Marcus Mariota. Is he going to run a little bit? Sure, I don't care. I just can't emphasize enough. The game situations Atlanta's probably going to be in next year because they don't have a good defense. It's going to lead to some really big games for Mariota. And right off the bat, I mean, I'm going to be picking up. I'm already got interest in picking this guy up as a late round target for season long. Best ball, a great late round if you're a guy who waits on drafting quarterbacks. And, you can pair him with Pitts, but you can also grab, for best ball purposes, someone like a Christian Blake, maybe, who's going to be dropped into a starting role. So really easy to pair him with. Lots of potential for fantasy purposes for Marcus Mariota next year. We're still early. They could draft a quarterback, but I think this is a way more fantasy. This one has way more fantasy implications because Mariota is obviously a bit of a bridge quarterback. They're giving him a try. They're giving him an attempt. He's going to bridge a year for them. But who knows? Who knows what can happen? I mean, this is a really talented dude, and I'm excited that he's getting another chance because I've always liked watching him play.
Yeah, you get the sense he's got a legitimate chance to win the starting job. Atlanta does have the 8th overall pick, but it's not a quarterback-friendly draft this year. We were talking about it off the air. Kenny Pickett might be the first guy off the board, but at 8, it's way too early. So Atlanta could go out, maybe draft a receiver high in the draft, or they get more help on offensive line. You mentioned the sack rate. Yes, it was last in the NFL in 2021. Just over 3%. And it's not close. The next team after them was a full 1.7% ahead of them, the Kansas City Chiefs, which that is not good company because the Chiefs weren't good either when it came to sack rate as well in the National Football League. So, yeah, that's a good call. I think Mariota, you might want to wait on these specials, though, with Mariota, only because we don't know. We need more clarity to know if it's his job.
Yeah, they might adjust a bit too, right? I mean, if you're betting Mariota's everyone's kind of high on him. Oh, it's he's going to be in the dome now. So you might, who knows, these numbers might, they might drift downwards because I think 18 is a pretty good line. If I had to say, it's actually a pretty good opening line for Mariota. Any bigger and I'd be taking the under. Any smaller and if it was 17, I'd almost be saying yeah, you should be betting that today. But I think 18, I'd probably lean slightly over just because, touchdowns can be variable. And I think Mariota's got a great chance to start all 17 games. And if he does, he'll have a great shot at it. But yeah, waiting is never a bad idea, especially till the draft for these specials. Because they ain't going anywhere, I don't think, anyways. So,
yep. So, and there's specials available as well for Matt Ryan, 25.5 touchdown passes next year, over or under 4,050.5 yards.
I think the yardage is something I would fade on Ryan.
Really?
Again, I just see them as being a run first.
Taylor. Yeah.
I think Taylor's just going to get so many carries next year, but the passing touchdowns is interesting. If we think the Colts are going to be a good team, they're also going to be in the red zone a ton too. And I know Jonathan Taylor is going to grab a ton, but like, what's to stop Matt Ryan from, pulling a bit of I guess you could go back again to Peyton Manning's last year where, he still put up some touchdowns, but didn't really throw for many yards. But I think, more of almost like a Drew Brees situation in his later years where his yardage numbers went down, but like he still threw for, 20, 24 passing touchdowns, maybe even a few more than that, if I can remember correctly. But I think Matt Ryan at 25.5, not like a must bet, but I'd rather go over on his touchdowns than over on his passing yard. I'd probably even take the under on the passing yardage.
Okay. I want to find out now that you brought that up, that what he did for passing touchdowns last year. Matt Ryan. Let's see. Matt Ryan. Here they are right now. So in 2021, Matt Ryan, 20 and 12, 20 touchdowns, 12 picks.
Yeah. And that's playing on a poor team. I mean, how many, I would venture to guess Atlanta probably in terms of red zone opportunities, probably like bottom 5 in the league, right? I mean, they had no run game. They had no defense to stop anyone at any time. So, even just 20 touchdowns on Atlanta last year, like that's pretty good. He's probably going to get not double the amount of red zone opportunities, but he's going to get more red zone opportunities, better team. There might be some games where he just gets like 4 passing touchdowns randomly because the Colts are just dominating and they're just in the red zone like 8 times in the first half or something, right? So yep. I think the Colts are a good enough team that he can actually breach that, but that number looks pretty correct as well. I certainly wouldn't, if it was 26, I'd probably be saying just lay off it, but 25.5 is interesting. If it got down to 24.5, I'd be taking the over.
Carson Wentz threw 27 last year, and
the other, that's probably the best comparable, right? I think if anything, this Colts team is going to be even better this year. So, right.
And Jonathan Taylor didn't really get going until I know, look, start to finish, he was probably the best back in the league, but he really didn't get it. He really didn't start clicking. Maybe till like a month into the season, right?
Yep, no, that's true. Didn't really start the year like
Miami on the road. Like, yeah, you're right. They had some tough games. They started off slow. That's right. They were 0-4 or definitely 0-3.
I think they were like 1-4, maybe 1-3. I can't remember. They started off slow. They had a tough schedule.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, Matt Ryan's running back last year was Cordero Patterson. And they started the year with Mike Davis. I think they had another guy too, and I can't remember who it was, but yeah, I mean, that's your running game. And Cordero Patterson emerged as their pass catching back as well. And he was actually pretty good. They re-signed him. So Marcus Mariota has him now. We'll take your questions here in the chats. If you guys have thoughts, even just comments, you want to weigh in on this stuff. Hey, I'll say this. It's going to make the Madden game more fun, assuming that continues in 2022. All these quarterbacks moving. Like we talked about that last year.
Man. I mean, if you're doing the Madden Sims, I mean, gonna have a ton of movement. You're gonna get to play Marcus Mariota again, rushing QB, Madden Marcus. I mean, that's gonna be awesome. Matt Ryan working with Michael Pittman could be good as well. So yeah, you can have Devontae Adams too. That's another guy who's got specials up. He's got an over under of 10 receiving touchdowns on the sports book.
Yep.
1,300 yards.
Just occurred to me. So there will be a return of Madden Mitch in Pittsburgh. Mitch
yeah.
Trubisky.
Oh yeah, and Madden Mitch. Jeez.
And has Mariota been a starting quarterback in any Madden we ever did?
No.
That's nuts.
So I mean, we're gonna get a first timer here. Yeah, I mean, a couple of mobile quarterbacks for Madden. That's gonna be it's gonna be wicked. So I mean, Madden Mitch was he was right up there with the top players. He could juke that ball. We got in the open field there, Brendan. So
just on Wednesdays, stay away because of the weather.
Weather Wednesdays. I mean, come on. I mean, if you weren't playing the defense and special teams, you were just a fish out there, right? So
we've got a question from Ryan. He's actually you mentioned this, Jeff, in our pre-show Slack exchange.
Right.
What is next in terms of quarterback movement? And a name that still has yet to move is Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, so here's a bit of an underdog for Garoppolo, and that's the New York Giants. I think this team is actually very interested in bringing in some competition for Daniel Jones. And I don't know about their cap space or anything. So admittedly, I haven't looked too deep into this. It just, they were linked a little bit to Mitch Trubisky at times. They were linked to trying to bring in someone. And if you
Russell
really
Wilson was a thought.
Yeah, right. And if you really want to bring in competition, Jimmy Garoppolo is like a legit competition. I mean, he's a guy who will sit there and he'll, he's sat through like attempts to kind of take over his job in San Francisco.
Yep.
And he's a pretty good teammate, it seems like, too. So I think that is a potential spot. It's also potential that, San Francisco has just played themselves out of this market too. I'm not sure. And I don't think that the Carolina Panthers, unfortunately, because of the contract they gave Sam Darnold, are in any interest in taking Jimmy Garoppolo at this point. I think that maybe would have already happened. But if I was Carolina, I would probably be looking to try and get rid of Darnold and take on Garoppolo. I would rather have that as my bridge quarterback than have Sam Darnold wasting another year of my time. But that's just me. I think that the market for Jimmy Garoppolo is increasingly small right now. And it's going to take a team like the Giants who finally decide, we have to have someone here to back up Daniel Jones this year. We can't just go in with Daniel Jones. And I'm not sure if there's any other teams out there like that. Do the Colts bring him in too, just because of like backup for Matt Ryan? I don't know. I guess like something crazy like that could happen, but I think the market for Matt Ryan is drying up. It is as dry as it's going to get, quite frankly. It's going to take kind of a team doing something a little bit, not out of the blue, but just a little bit shocking, I think, to take Jimmy Garoppolo at this point. There was reports they had like an offer of 2 seconds for Jimmy Garoppolo today. I'm not sure I believe that, just because I think they would have just taken it already, but
yeah,
who knows? As far as who's the other player we were talking about? Baker?
Oh yeah, Baker. Baker's got to move.
Well, I don't know if Ryan brought up this question, but that's
Brian just asked about Garoppolo. And
yeah, I think Garoppolo. I think he might end up sent back to San Francisco. I think it's going to take a team like the Giants, but I think Seattle. I think Seattle's got to be interested in Baker Mayfield at this point. He seems like a Pete Carroll guy, like a rah-rah, go out there and get him. He's got his own personality. But I don't really know what Seattle's doing. They haven't really made any waves. They haven't been connected to anybody. It almost seems like Seattle just wants to wait and doesn't seem to care, which maybe they're just sold. They're like, we got Geno Smith. He won us a game last year. Pete Carroll is going to do what he wants to do. And if he thinks that's the right thing, man, like
maybe the organization would have to have Carroll's back on this. But if he's like, look, we're not going to compete, which I think if you're a team in the NFC, and by the way, the chat has noted this, the Giants did pick up Tyrod Taylor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So just scrap whatever I said.
But I was going to add, I liked your thought because Daboll coached Garoppolo in New England when he was coaching tight ends. When the Patriots drafted Garoppolo in 2013, he was there for 4 years. And that's why I think Pittsburgh had interest in Trubisky, which I think Trubisky might work because, Tyrod Taylor moving there, not quite the same player as a Garoppolo per se, but I like the thought process. In terms of Baker going to Seattle, if you're Seattle and you've got Lockett and DK Metcalf, you have to think about this, right? And they re-signed Disley. We talked about that during free agency last week when Adam Levitan couldn't understand what the heck is going on in Seattle. But does Pete Carroll have the luxury of saying, yeah, we're going to go with Geno for a year? Does he have that job stability right now to do that? I don't think he does.
I mean, the franchise picked Russell Wilson over him. So I think he kind of does, actually. That's the scary part if you're a Seattle Seahawks fan. I mean, you legitimately have Pete Carroll.
Hey, great. I'll just say this. You're onto something. I know it's not quite the same in terms of Super Bowls, but Bill Belichick went with Cam Newton for a year and he kept his job, of course.
So it's kind of looking like that kind of year for Seattle, right? Like where they're going to take a guy off the street or they're just going to roll with Geno Smith and that's going to be it. So Yeah, Baker and Jimmy are kind of just floating. Really think of a spot for these guys off the top of my head. It's gonna take something like a team like Houston going out there and getting someone to compete for Davis Mills. And I someone's probably going to chime in. Well, Houston has this guy too, who's okay. Like Seattle, because Seattle is like the one musical chair that's still open. Although it's just open in our minds. It may not be open in Pete Carroll's mind because Geno Smith is sitting there. I don't know, man. It's perplexing, and Jimmy Garoppolo probably deserves a starting quarterback nomination over some of these spots, but let's move on. I mean, they really do.
That's where it's bad. It's not quite the same because I'm not trying to compare Garoppolo to Aaron Rodgers, but the Aaron Rodgers thing in Green Bay is Green Bay admitting Jordan Love ain't ready, and it's that's telling you something because they're like he ain't ready. Which would be alarming.
I mean, I don't know.
There's a lot of time for that though.
This is why I like what Atlanta could play. This is why I like what Atlanta did though. Like you've got to pull the Band-Aid off with these guys. If you're not invested in them long term, or you don't think they give you the best chance, or there's just slightly better upside going in a different direction, whether it's because of what you're getting in return or whatever, like just do it. I mean, I think that's kind of always been my philosophy. So
sure.
Yeah.
I thought Atlanta was a year too late though with Matt Ryan. That's my only criticism of it. I thought they could have done it
last year was a complete waste for them. No, you're right. You're not wrong. I mean, last year was a joke. I mean, it was there at no point was that team competitive for anything last year. So,
but maybe
really think of one. I mean, the NFC East is pretty much set. Like Washington's made their move. The Bears, Fields, the
Jared
Vikings,
Goff played okay, but this Baker move the needle.
I mean, Detroit's another team. Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo, like, do you really need to invest in two of those guys? I mean, I don't know. Like Jared Goff was semi-serviceable last year.
I'm thinking Baker. I'm thinking Baker because he would go to the other. Yeah. He would go to the other conference.
Yeah,
like Seattle.
I mean, Detroit, maybe, definitely like a spot for Baker, I think, but we haven't heard anything.
Carolina.
I think Carolina is a wild card in this. I mean, at some point they've just got to say like, we have to do something. Like I kind of hate talking about Carolina because they've screwed the situation up so bad. Like they almost don't deserve to get a good quarterback at this point. Having the 8th pick, not taking Justin Fields or trading up for another one of those quarterbacks, and then signing Sam Darnold to not just signing him, but signing him to like a longer term contract where he's kind of like handcuffed to you. What a horrible management of assets there. Like, my God, you take the rookie quarterback, you take the cheap salary, in like a historically good draft class too. Oh man, they don't deserve any of these guys. They deserve to be with Sam Darnold for the next 3 years. Like that should be their punishment. The NFL shouldn't let them trade away anyone. Anyways,
but they should. They should, because the NFC, those wild card spots are up for grabs, in my opinion. I think we found out last year, like we found out this offseason, like it's a very watered down conference at quarterback. So if you're Carolina, you think you have all the pieces, go for it.
Oh, they should be going for it. You're right. Like they should be trying to get themselves out of this mess. But I'm just saying they were in such a good spot last year to fix themselves at quarterback and have like, more cap space, whatever. And they didn't do it. So I don't know. I think the most interesting quarterback news is still the one we haven't talked about, which is Watson and what he does for the Browns. Maybe we'll just quickly check his division odds, and then we can go to the to golf for a bit.
So if we go to division winner, you're talking about division winner in the North?
Yeah. Check out what's going on.
Plus 175, but Jeff, the risk here is we don't know how many games he might miss. There's a very strong possibility, right?
Absolutely, man. And, they brought in Jacoby Brissett, which I like. I think Jacoby Brissett is actually a good backup for that team because they're a team with a ton of young talent on defense. They can run the ball with Nick Chubb. It's an interesting division. I mean, I see the Steelers there at plus 850, and I mean, I'll be dead honest. I'd sprinkle some on the Steelers. We
talked about the Steelers last week. I'm with you. I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to be pretty good. They got better. They improved.
Yep. They have, their quarterback isn't going to be suspended. I mean, their defense is still solid. They've got they had the most sacks per game last year. I don't see how that team's worse than last year, and they made the playoffs last year. So
Mike Tomlin's never had a losing record, right? He's
regardless,
been 8 minimum.
Yeah. I mean, regardless of how you see the Steelers, I don't think they should be plus 850. So interesting division. That's going to be an interesting one. Maybe the Bengals just keep playing well and they got Joe Burrow, but I know the one team I'm definitely out on there is the Ravens again. I just I don't see it, but
yeah, I mean, my advice on Cleveland would be to wait, and then you're going to get a better number if Watson's out a month. But to your point, if you're thinking, all right, Jacoby Brissett, totally fine. He can fill the void with that offensive line, that running game. They got Amari Cooper. They still have Hooper at receiver. Has Jarvis Landry moved yet? He has not, has he?
No, he's a free agent. He's still out there too.
He's still out there. Huh. Okay. All right. That's right. So well, we'll see. But,
Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper. They have David Njoku at tight end. That's still the argument I made on the Sweat this morning too. Like, for Deshaun Watson's fantasy value, if they don't sign another wide receiver, Cleveland ran the most 13 personnel last year.
Keem Grant, they have him too.
And they had that 13 personnel means 3 tight ends on the field. So they like to run the ball. They like to use their tight ends, like the 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. Mm-hmm. So they're not necessarily set up for a lot of that. Doesn't mean that they can't adjust the offense to more RPOs or just, run a little bit more 11 personnel. But if they don't get like another like slot receiver in there, I know you threw Cole Beasley out there or someone else. It may be like a little bit. I mean, I think Deshaun Watson's accuracy is still going to be a huge improvement over Baker, but just from a fantasy perspective, I could see it necessarily not being like the shootout year that everyone thinks it's going to be. So I don't know. It's a very interesting landing spot. I like Kevin Stefanski, but he's really going to have to change his outlook a little bit to adjust for Deshaun Watson, like to really maximize his talents.
So yes, you're right about Njoku. I forgot Hooper is now in Tennessee Titan. Yep. They did sign Jakeem Grant. So it's Jakeem Grant, Amari Cooper, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Yeah. Let's get a couple minutes here on the WGC, Dell Match Play, Dell Technologies Championship. You were mentioning before we started that you think this is a big week for the sports book in terms of people just having interest here because you do have these match play situations.
Yeah, it's like a little mini college basketball tournament. It's awesome. It's obviously the pod format. All the golfers get grouped into four-man pods to start, and they play a round robin. So if you go under matchups, you can find all the pods and the odds to win the pods. And if
odds to win the pods, I like that.
Odds to win the pods. I mean, that could be like a podcast, title right there. The odd to the pod. But the way it works is if they're tied after 3 matches, then they play like a sudden death playoff, just like 1 hole, 2 holes, however long it takes. So you have all the odds up there, and we've seen at this event, especially last year, like the long shots are very, very in play here last year. The quarterfinals last year had 1 top 20 player. It was John Rahm, and like everybody else was like 21st or worse in the world golf rankings. So that kind of gives you an idea of what happened last year. We had Victor Perez make the semifinals. I'll just go over a couple of my favorite long shots here. I think you can look to Patrick Reed potentially to win that first group. He's played a little bit better. He's a good match play player. He's never had a losing record in the pod stage at this event since it's been at Austin Country Club. John Rahm, I know he's John Rahm. He's not necessarily playing at the top of his game right now. So I think you can look to him. I do kind of like Keith Mitchell. I can't remember what pod he's in. He's in group 4 with Patrick Cantlay. Keith Mitchell playing good. He's plus 3,000. And then I also like Max Homa, group 8 at plus 230. And we will take one favorite. We'll go Russell Henley, group 14 at plus 220. I really like the setup for Russ. That's probably my favorite outright bet too. Henley at plus 3,500. Although I really like Homa at plus 6,000 as well. I think both those guys are really live this week. They have good draws too, I think.
Awesome. How about a quick minute on the contest? How would you approach a DFS contest for this event?
So one of the biggest things when you're making match play contest is you got to look at the bracket and you want what you want. If you're going to go in the big contests, we're talking like big field GPP strategy.
Yeah.
You want to try and give yourselves a chance, at least a chance to get all 4 of your players live in the semifinals. If you're taking 3 players from like the same quarter of the bracket, maybe one guy gets through, but your other 2 guys will be eliminated.
Good point.
you only have like 2 players left. So, you've got to give yourselves the shot. So make sure when you're making lineups, you're trying to make that optimal setup and have at least one guy from each quarter of the bracket so that they could potentially meet up in the semifinals. That's the main thing this week. You want to start there. If you're making big field GPP lineups, it's the most optimal way. You're trying to get the optimal lineup. Obviously, it's the hard part is picking the golfers. Last year, like I said, like in terms of world golf ranking, maybe. So it was like almost impossible to pick last year. But if you at least gave yourself the shot, then you could have theoretically fallen on those guys. That's the other advice. Don't be like scared to leave like $3,000 on the table. If you want to pick like the 3rd ranked player in a pod and the 2nd ranked player in the pod and the 4th ranked player in a pod, just because you like those guys, just do it. The underdogs are so live at this event. It's not even funny. So it's a weird event. It's match play. It's a lot of variables. And we got the Masters in 2 weeks. So all these top players, they lose their first match. They're just like, you know what? Sign for betting, because you can wake up every morning. You got fresh match odds. You got the group odds, and you got the outright to look at. But, for the top players, it's kind of like it's hit or miss. Like some of these guys will show up and some of them will just be like, I really don't care. So fun event.
Yeah, I think the March Madness comp is very good. I just pulled this up
absolutely.
on if you go to on Twitter, if you go to @Dell Match Play, WGC Dell Technologies Match Play, they have their own account and they have a picture at the top of their account with the bracket. So maybe when you're making a lineup, if you want to do daily fantasy, you have your bracket printed, and that way pick your spots.
Yep,
gotta have some balance.
In my article, it's up on DK Nation for the PGA cheat sheet. You can follow me at the Fantasy Grind too. I'll tweet that out. It's got a link to the bracket in the article. So if you're having trouble finding it, there'll be a link in there too. But again, I can't emphasize it enough, man. Have the bracket and know where your guys are before you necessarily pick them. You want to spread it out so you got access to those 4 guys meeting in the semifinals. Don't drink Diet Pepsi. Well, don't drink Diet Pepsi, period. But definitely don't drink it while you're doing a video like me.
On that note, that will do it for us today here on the Slate. Thanks for tuning in. Lots going on in the NFL offseason. And of course, we will have more golf coverage as the week goes on. We have what's going on in Putacana as well on the PGA front, and also these match play contests in the WGC Dell Match Play. For Jeff Ulrich, Brendan Glasheen, thanks to Eamon and Andrew behind the scenes. Be sure to keep it locked in here every weekday. Just around 5 o'clock, we take you until 6 o'clock for the slate. And then every weekday, of course, on the YouTube and Twitch pages, also Twitter, we have the sweat at 11 a.m. So look forward to more tomorrow. You'll have a great rest of your Monday. We'll see you.